Welcome to Surrender School.
All right, thank you, Cheryl. Hi, everyone, and it's a lovely day here in South Portland, Maine, and we're going to talk about the Type 2. As I was saying to someone, I've been married to a Type 2 for 27 years, and been fortunate to have the company of someone who is so consistently kind and loving. Of course, none of the types are perfect, and when we're in a bad place, we all have our way of sort of becoming the opposite of our gifts. So we'll talk a little bit about that today with the Type 2. I've been in recovery myself for over 40 years, and the thing that I notice is that there's always something new to work on. So just about the time I think I've handled my issues, I'll discover something brand new, and of course I'll be upset at first, like, oh no, I gotta work again, I gotta go deeper than I was, I've got to be able to abide in humility as I notice, oh, here's a 40-year habit that I missed for the last 40 years while I was working on all the others above it. So we talk about the idea of, we take 4 steps forward for healing and growth, and then 3 steps back, which to me often means that the healing I've gone through opens my eyes to seeing something that I've been missing. And, you could call that shadow work, unconscious work. As my one of my teachers said, Michael, you can relax today because you miss most everything. So just try to relax. Easy does it, man. I've found that to be true. The longer I'm awake and sober and working on myself, the more I discover what I don't know, which I know I'm not the only one who goes through that shock of, oh, I only know a little bit. But then the shock of realizing that on a given day, if I'm really awake, I might take in 35% of reality in an accurate way, which is good. It makes for a good day. But it's only to try to create some space and room around, especially for the 2. 2s have a severe inner critic, which says to the 2, in all cases, you should be loving and kind. And if you have any issues that you need to work on, then it's actually kind of selfish to consider working on them. And so 2s sometimes are really good at getting other people into therapy, but with their harsh inner critic, they can be the last one that shows up for counseling. So that said, let's just take a little step into the slides and just talking about the whole gamut of the Type 2. So I like to start off with this one, which is just a reminder that we have 9 types, and we're dealing here today with the Type 2, the intuitive healer. And when if you're an intuitive healer, you may also notice that you have a leaning towards one of the types on your right and your left. So intuitive healers, the reformer, can have a wing of the merciful teacher. And if you can imagine a dot on the larger circle where this 2-ishness might be, it's leaning in towards the 1. Or you can be a Type 2 with a 3 wing. And I'm not going to go into great depth about the wings, but they're a slightly different type of expression of the 2, but they all have the same core issues. The other thing I just want to mention briefly, which down the road I will do some workshops on the arrows. And in this case, the 2 has an arrow to 8. So one conversation is that for the Type 2, the loving, healing, intuitive healer, sometimes they get fed up with being nice all the time. It kind of builds up, and then they explode and go to 8 and become the shadow part of the lion-hearted protector, where the dragon comes out, or the witch lady, and leaves marks. And ultimately, the journey around the 2 is, how do I develop this capacity to embrace my personal power and assertiveness, because often the inner critic of the two says you're not allowed to be assertive. That's selfish. Maybe you empower other people to be assertive, but that's not for you. So that's one arrow. And the other is a 2 has an arrow to 4, to the creative alchemist. And with the 2s I know in my life, many of them are very creative, but they're usually so bound up in taking care of other people that they don't ever manifest their creativity in the way they could. So again, there's a story here. As a type 2, I'm endowed with a generous and kind heart, this powerful capacity to take in and feel what other people are feeling. But there's this inner critic message that says at all costs you should be nice and sweet and not growl too often. So the 2, when it's getting healthy, starts moving towards the direction of 4. And the direction of 4 is, the 4 has a vow to always be emotionally honest, even if it disturbs everyone. The healthier version is that they are very emotionally honest and speak the truth of their own heart. So 2s, as they grow, begin to mature and anchor some of these gifts also. So 9 types, we can embody any of the energies of the types, but this type 2 energy, in a sense, is our foundation, and what shows up particularly when we're under stress. So let's see what the next one is. Okay. Can you see this intuitive healer? Is that coming up on the screen? Awesome. All right. This is a rule for the road for the type 2. If your compassion does not include yourself, it's not complete. And that is a huge growth edge for the 2s. It's almost as if the inner critic says, thou shalt not be nice to yourself. But you should be nice to everyone else. Otherwise, you're not a good and loving person. So let's read this introduction. The type 2, known as the nurturer, mentor, and intuitive healer, is endowed with a generous and loving heart, sensitive to the nuances of other people's suffering. It's as if they have this wide open heart that just feels the energetic flow of other people around them on an emotional level. And their attention just goes there naturally because there's this deep wish to be a vehicle of kindness and love for people. Naturally inclined to heal, help, or sometimes carry the sufferer until they can carry themselves. That's a big deal sentence from the standpoint that sometimes 2s are so sensitive to the suffering of others and don't want them to suffer and find it painful to be in the presence of other people's suffering that they can sometimes put the other person on their back and carry them across the finish line, somewhat like Samwise Gamgee did with Frodo. So she is loving, caring soul, a compassionate helper known for possessing and expressing unconditional love and kindness. So there's this innate capacity, particularly if they haven't been traumatized too much, to just have a sense of natural kindness towards whoever they're with. There's a kind of sweet and precious heart that is part of the 2 and can be a quite forgiving person to have in your life. Generously touches people with the sweetness of her heart. In addiction, however, she becomes certain she is not loved or valuable and becomes desperate to hold any connection with others regardless of the expense to oneself. This pattern becomes the source of her relapse back to addiction. So what we can say is, when I'm healthy as a 2, I have natural contact with what I would call objective compassion, which means that I can not be sucked into other people's suffering, but I can observe it, respond from a compassionate place, but not take on the other person's suffering. That's a balance too. And as I, grow and mature, I become more and more aware that my loving presence is often more powerful than any action I can take to show my love. So there's something around this long-term goal of learning to abide in a kind of unconditional kindness in my own soul for self and others that creates an atmosphere of healing for people. And if you're around a healthy 2, you're going to feel blessed. There's a way that their ambiance just touches you on a deep and kind way without a lot of words. And that's a big one for the two to understand, because their tendency is, whenever I feel a kindness towards somebody, I'm inclined to reach in and give them a gift. Could be, it could be a pencil, could be a piece of candy, could be a sandwich, could be a shirt for you to wear. But there's a sense of, I give you something as a way of acknowledging we're connected. So in addiction, everything sort of turns into the opposite of the gift. And in this case, she is driven by the horror of feeling that she's rejected, unwanted, disposable to anyone she cares for, and likely to be abandoned at any moment for the slightest infraction. So we say that the type 2 is a rejection type, and they're incredibly sensitive to the nuances of rejection. Could be an expression, a look, could be, what we know about 2s is they tend to remember what people appreciate and, go out of their way to try to give to them and acknowledge them through giving. And so with the type 2, when someone forgets them, first off, they're horrified. Like, can't you figure this out? I'm giving to you all the time and you just forgot I have a need. But then that sense of being forgotten for type 2s, it can be just like somebody has just stuck a knife in their heart, a sense of I'm not loved, I'm not wanted. And so there's a part of the pattern of the 2 to always to be trying to do things that make sure no one rejects them. So, I am so lovable, so attuned to your needs. How could you ever throw me out? You're going to experience a great loss because I've got your needs covered. Well, what about your needs? Oh, well, forget about those. I'll explode later and tell you why I'm angry for not having received anything for the past 5 years. So anyway, this sense of rejection is something that most 2s will have a sense of. It's almost like at any moment, the person who loves me could actually exile me for the rest of my life at any moment. There's like an emergency sniper hanging around with him who says, are you being rejected? Do they want you? Let's see, we went to bed last night and we were really connected, but this morning I feel like I have to prove all over again why I'm worthy of love and why I'm such a loving person. So it's a deep pattern, and a lot of 2s will say, yeah, this thing just drives me crazy, because what I tend to do sometimes is I overgive in response to feeling like you're going to reject me, because I don't actually quite get why I am lovable. So the deep wound of the 2 is of being unlovable, unworthy of love, unwanted, and not needed. And so the natural defense response that little boys and little girls learned was to try to stay connected by giving and anticipating caregivers' needs. And then when it's become an adult, people start to get irritated with them because they are always sort of stepping in to fill the next need, and some people find that intrusive. So in spite of that, the 2 feel she must make herself indispensable to others, or else they will be abandoned. And that's a big deal. That's not like something I just think about. That's in the whole core of my being, that sense, that trigger of being abandoned. So key commandment for the 2 is I should care for the needs of others to have a place in the world. That's my job. She's only as valuable as the love she gives others. She must not need anything for herself. And this is like the walking orders of the personality, what the inner critic is constantly reminding the 2 of. The deep wish, however, is a deep desire to love and be unconditionally loved. We say that the type 2s are the kings and queens of loving kindness and connection, and that Valentine's Day was made for type 2s. And every 2 I know gets quite ecstatic when Valentine's comes around, including my wife, who wants to just give to all their friends, and here I am, sort of an outlier, going, what is this holiday anyway? Type 4s, we don't really attune to this. So the key command, the deep wound, being rejected, deep commandment, the deep wish is that 2 has a deep wish to love and unconditionally be loved, and to be deeply connected with those whom she loves. And that's a big one. It's, this sense of I need to have some felt sense that I'm with you. And because I doubt it, one of the ways I check for it is if I give you a gift and you receive it positively, right? And if you've ever been with a two where, my poor wife gives me a gift and said, "Do you like it?" I said, "No, I really don't. Could you take it back?" And it's like she's just crestfallen. She says, as a type 2, I search into the depths of the universe to find that one gift that's going to make you feel loved and connected with me. And you just said, "No, thank you. I don't like this." That's like throwing me out onto the street with no food or shelter. So there's a deep core response, and the two will, is always in a sense on the watch for whether you're tuning to them. And the slightest thing, I laugh sometimes because every holiday that comes around, Donna gives me an amazing card as if it's the very first card I've ever received of a loving nature. And, I always say, "I love you, happy birthday, Michael." She's like 3 pages of voluminous descriptions of why she loves me. And it's just how she is. She does that with everyone. So I must not need anything for myself. And on a deeper level, the deep wish, which isn't neurotic at all, is really to be in service of love, to be able to be skillful and awake enough to help people feel a sense of love or move in a direction of their own capacities to self-love. And when I'm healthy as a 2, I'm not doing it out of fear of abandonment. I'm doing it because my own heart has been healed, and now I have just tremendous generosity and energy for giving away what I've been given. So, when I'm healthy as a 2, I'm sensitive to whether my giving is creating a sense of intrusion for people, and I don't take it personally. A lot of 2s would say, I'd give you my whole wardrobe if you needed it. But, when I start to give to compensate for feeling abandoned, there's a different energy about it that sometimes people start kind of pushing away from the 2. It's almost like you're getting too much love on me here, man. This doesn't feel quite right. So we say that when the 2 is healthy, they exude what we might call the clean heart. There's no attachment to whether you receive their gift or not. And they have a way of being objective and very forgiving when people respond in a way that they didn't expect them to. So there's a balance. And when we talk about the levels of health, you'll see the difference. So how the 2 sees themselves? The 2 sees herself as always loving, kind, considerate, generous, and without any negative motivations. Now, in this case, we're referring to the self-image. All the types have a self-image. The type 2 is, I'm a loving, kind person, and my inner critic says, you better be that, or you're going to be condemned to the fires of hell, or just basically unloved and unwanted. So what happens for 2 sometimes is if, let's just say, their partner sees it. If I say to Donna, she'll say, "What do you want for Christmas?" Gosh, I've received so much for Christmas, I'll need nothing until my next lifetime. And she goes, "Oh, God, you don't want anything?" "I truly do not." "Oh, God. Well, can I get you something?" "No, you don't really need to. You've given me abundantly for years." But there's something about, I'm this loving person, and when a loving person offers to give somebody something, the person responds with, "Thank you so much, I really appreciate it." So there's that, and then we say that type 2s are very, very sensitive to criticism because their self-image is they're being the best, kindest, sweetest person they can be. And when you point out, like, sometimes you're intrusive with your giving, it's like somebody has just, thrown a spear right through their heart and soul, because on a certain level, their inner critic says, "Thou shalt not have flaws." Because if you have flaws, that means you have work to do, and that's not okay. That doesn't make you a loving and kind person. So for each of the 2s, on this call, there's something about learning to notice, when that story comes up, if a partner, usually it's often people saying, "You're giving me too much. I don't need so much. You can tone that down." So I'm thinking of 2 Christmases ago, And my Christmas is a big deal for my wife. You're going to get lots of gifts. And at one point, I was looking across at my daughter, Chloe, who's 26 then, and stacked up were 25 gifts sitting next to her. And I said to Don, I said, this might be an example of overgiving. Just take in this impression right now. There are 25 gifts next to Chloe. Chloe, what do you think about that? Well, Chloe's a straight shooter. She says, it's way too much. Take half of these back. This is like killing me. So again, if you're a type 2, you may notice sometimes that you overgive. And it's all with good intention, and there's nothing wrong with it. But at level 4, that's when I start to fall prey to the emotional habit of pride, in which she attends everyone else's needs to the exclusion of her own, and maybe even polishes herself and says, I am awesome for giving so much. I wish the rest of you selfish people would wake up. So she perceives, and again, this is sincere delusion. She perceives that she doesn't have needs. And when we start hitting level 4 on down, we start to go a little bit more unconscious on every level, which means that we can't really understand when a type 2 is told that you overgive. It's like, oh my God, I only gave you half of what I wanted to give you. What are you talking about? So learning to understand and feel that she has needs is a big deal. The mental habit of ingratiation keeps her continually thinking about others, worrying about them, and thinking of ways to make themselves indispensable. And I notice this with 2s, where 2s worry a lot like 6s, but it's like if they hear that anything slightly difficult has happened to one of their kids, it's like, oh my God, I'm really concerned for them. And I'm thinking, well, why? They're fine. They're going to work this out. If they need help, they'll call me. But for her, it's almost like if I have someone to worry about that I love, I feel like I'm doing my job. That's what a good person does. They think about this. So 2s are known for sometimes trying to create matchmaking arrangements with other friends, like, oh, here's Mary. I know Tom. She'd love him. Let's get them together, And so there's this sense of, trying to take care of other people's needs that sometimes the bottom line is it's not your business. But Ann Landers didn't know any better, and she made a living out of it, and others did too. So she begins to pride herself on believing she knows what others needs. So as we're going along, if people have questions popping up, just let me know, Cheryl, because I can't see them. I just want to create that invitation. So the inner critic, and this is big. Every type has an inner critic that really is the driver of the personality patterns. So the 2's inner critic says she is good only when she is connected to and considering others. So if you're mad at me, type 2s will say, when people are mad at me, it drives me crazy. I got to fix it right away because it feels like I'm dying. So connected and considering others when she is thinking and doing for others, otherwise she's selfish. And the problem that sort of this leads to is this idea that it's not okay for me to directly ask for what I want. And what 2s start to do is they hint at what they want. At one point in my life, whenever I was on the road teaching the Enneagram, my wife would send me a barrage of cards reminding me that I was loved. And of course, the women at the workshop went, oh, she's so nice. This is great. So this happens every time we go. Well, do you send her a card? No, I do not. She says, well, maybe she's asking for a little reciprocity here. And I thought, maybe, but I cannot mail 40 cards out to equal it. So just do one. It might quiet this whole barrage down. So again, it's just sort of the nuances of the 2. And at their best, the 2 is generous and kind to others and herself. She doesn't need to save people from their suffering. And one of the things about type 2s is because they feel so deeply when they're rejected, if they spot it in someone else and they're suffering with rejection, it's like it just reminds them, oh my God, I can barely bear this. And so I go and I try to help the person, even if it isn't in the best interest of the other person. But I become oversensitive to noticing the abandonment in others And until I mature and get healthier, I can overhelp when it would be good not to do that. So when I'm healthy, don't need to save people. I'm aware that I can't control, cure, or change another, which is what makes Al-Anon such a great program for those of you who have these two patterns. She has good boundaries and loves with a clean heart, meaning no strings are attached. She loves abundantly and skillfully, knowing how to care for herself. So there's a balance, and there's an understanding also that my loving kindness of anything will wake up the will of others to improve their life. That loving kindness is powerful. I don't have to be doing so much for people. So that said, I'm just going to take a little pause here and see if questions are popping up for twos or people who live with twos or whatever's on your mind.
Okay. All right. So Melissa, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for that poetic description of a two. I loved it. And I have a sponsee who's a two, and she is a therapist. And she was recently rather horrified to take the Enneagram and find out I might be a two. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with a two. You're actually in a great job for a two. So here's my question. Knowing how selfless they are, the challenge is for her almost to stay in her own body, working on her own self, and integrate, oh yeah, it's okay to have some flaws here. It's totally okay. I'm wondering if you could give me a tip as a sponsor, as she's working through her fourth step, how to invite her inquiry in such a way that she can really grow and not feel ashamed.
Yeah.
There's no shame in having the flaws, and there's no shame in how I've coped up until now being a two, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect sense. Yeah, and good to see you, Melissa. How's life in the foreworld? All right, okay. So what I tend to do is try to model the behavior that I'm hoping to teach. So that means for me, humbly admitting, in my 44th year of recovery, I'm always learning about undeveloped unconscious parts of myself. And that doesn't make me bad. These are just imperfections that need, some attention and loving kindness and not beating myself up. And I often say that whatever I beat up in myself, I strengthen. So if I'm attacking myself for my patterns, that's actually a part of the pattern that keeps it going. And there's a great book called Self-Observation by Firehawk, who talks about, this whole journey of observing oneself, one of the key ingredients for relaxing patterns. Let's just say my pattern is to overgive. And so there I am, I catch myself in the act, I'm overgiving, and I can see the look on the person's face like, oh God, this is too much. I can then beat myself up and say, oh, I did that overgiving thing, which means it ensures that it'll keep the pattern going. Or I can notice with as much compassion, there it was. What was I feeling? Well, I wanted to ensure that we were close. I wanted to ensure that there was something I could do to make sure we're okay together. So if I can observe that and, really resist letting my spiritual inner critic come in and say, oh, you've been in recovery this long and you're still doing that? That's when you go, wait. These patterns, there's something to be learned about. Patterns that we learned as little ones, little boy and little girl, have a long life in resistance. And many times we have to observe them objectively hundreds of times before they're not automatic. So I think it's good to say, hey, all those women and men in the enlightened category would tell you, oh, you want to at least figure you're going to observe this pattern, run away like an errant child into the street a good 1,000 times before you finally have the eyes to see it and not be taken. So I think if there can be some objective understanding of that, then I'm not as inclined to feel like I should have this handled. And that, for me, the way I can share that is just notice, okay, well, what did I do this week that required me apologizing? There's usually at least one or two things where I need to say, I'm sorry, Donna, I'm really sorry I did that. So just trying to create a more objective sense of how slow sometimes growth is. Yeah, good to see you.
Thank you, Michael. Jasmine, I see your hand is up. Go ahead and unmute.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. So, have you been following me around all my life? No, no, seriously. It is apparent and clear that this is my type because once I got into Al-Anon, I started to feel better.
Mm,
Life was not as painful. So it's all coming together because I was torn between 6 and the 2. And I was talking about that in our office hours this morning. And so I am codependent. And one of my questions is this. The reason that I had confusion is because I have such a dark side. Like once my cup is empty,
mm-hmm.
cup runneth over rather, I become really dark. And that's why I thought I was 6. My question is, growing up in a den of narcissists, and I'm talking about full-blown NPDs, I didn't know whether I was pushed into codependency to survive that environment or is it really me? But it's definitely there. It changed my brain. And so I was wondering, is the 2 a side effect of being raised by narcissistic caregivers? Obviously, maybe most of us are traumatized, but I'm talking about specifically narcissistic personality disorder parents. Does this cause someone to become type 2 or any correlation, anything, any
Yeah,
thought?
yeah, yeah. So my sense is that we're born with our type in a healthy, safe environment. Type 2s would not be codependent in order to survive because it's a survival pattern. If I'm with a narcissist or somebody who's abusive or doesn't attune to me, then type 2s feel a certain kind of depression and desperation. Like, there's no love here. I can't get the love. And what they do to compensate, when you were 2, 3, and 4, you probably learned very clearly that to survive here, I need to be codependent and take care of people. And so, to the extent that you had to give yourself up, is probably to the extent that at a certain point as you're older, that you get fed up and go to the dark side and maybe start acting out your suffering. Or we could say you go to type 4, the unhealthy aspect of type 4, which might be something for you to read about. But if you had been raised in a balanced family, you would naturally love being connected with mom and dad, and you'd also love doing what you like to do and nurturing yourself. It would have been a balance. It wouldn't have been because codependence is always a survival response to lack of love across the board. No one's born with it. And based on my type, depending on how much neglect there was or lack of attention or lack of loving warmth, type 2s, you have a type 2, a little boy or a little girl, and they love to be seen, they love to be held, they love to be reminded that they're loved and appreciated and celebrated. And then they relax, and then they give appropriately. They don't, go over the edge trying to keep the crazy person from getting crazier. So, does any of this make sense to you?
Yes, I'm so glad it was validating because I couldn't decide whether it was an adaptation, like is this something I had to become, or is it my true
It's not your
authentic
true.
self?
No, yeah, it's not your authentic self. It's the defense structure to protect your authentic self. If you think of our type patterns when they become less healthy, they're always in service of protecting our authentic self so that we survive. So that one day, when we become an adult, we get to unpack the whole mess, right? But, it takes about 10, 15, 20 years. But, as the more you keep working on yourself and learning self-care, the more you're going to stay in contact with that true self, that true nature, which is a loving heart and the wish to connect with people in a kind way and to be treated kindly. So, that's where you're headed.
So let me make sure I'm understanding this correctly.
Yes.
Because I tick every characteristics of the two though. Like I am definitely codependent. I have blown my life up, lost teeth even, taking care of other people. I don't take care of myself. I definitely have that disease.
Hmm.
So I'm confused, like you
So,
said, look towards the four.
so let me say it more simply. All of those things you just described are the protective pattern of your type to help you survive. So you're not those patterns. It's almost like when I put this coat on, I'm putting on my type. It's almost like the car I drive. Well, I drive a type 4, and on a good day, I'm nice and kind with other drivers. When I'm less healthy and feel stressed, then I'm self-centered and I want my way and get out of my way. So that's the personality. Underneath the personality is the genuine essence of the human being. So as you learn to practice more self-care and resist overgiving, you will start to tap into that part of you that is just fundamentally love and that needs love yourself and also appreciates giving love. So, the mistake people sometimes make, everyone does, is that, if I've got sort of the bad behaviors of the type, then that's who I am. And what I say is, no, that's not who you are. That's the defensive patterns of the type that you had to develop as a little boy or little girl to survive feeling not loved. As you bring in more love, are able to receive it, those patterns start to disappear. And then the deeper nature comes out.
Thank you for that. Thank you
Yeah,
for clarifying it too.
absolutely.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Michael.
good.
Thank you, Jasmine. Okay, and Rose, to you.
Hey, y'all. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you, Surrender School, and thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Rose.
This is an interesting journey in that I so relate to the two. I've identified as a two for years. I'm an AA who's also done Al-Anon and ACA work and grew up with an alcoholic mother. But
Mm.
when you did the type 9, I went, wow, that's me. So it's interesting to me that while all that you're reading about too, I'm going, yes, 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 yes. It just seems like those defensive patterns from my growing up, or I don't know if this, like, my question to you is like, can the defensive early childhood patterns of codependency, as I've gotten healthier, and stopped people pleasing and being so, I've done more self-care, et cetera, et cetera. This idea of being a 9 and feeling excited as I learn more about a 9, going, wow. But then now that I'm back at the 2, I go, yeah, I so relate to all that. So maybe you could just respond to something from there, Michael.
Well, the 2s and the 9s are pretty close cousins.
Okay.
And ultimately, let's just say you are reading my book and looking at the suggestions for the 2 and the 9. I would just say, notice which of the suggestions, in either one of them, stand out as that's something I need to work on, and not be so worried about whether I'm a 2 or a 9. Now, there are some distinguishing differences, there can be. The type 2 tends to want to pull people in and be connected with them, and if someone's mad at them, they tend to track them down and try to create a connection again because they hate this connection. The type 9 tends to withdraw or get quiet and not say much or not try to it's like create space, lie beneath the conflict. No one will see me. It'll pass. So now we all, on bad days, I've done the 9 stuff, in certain circumstances, like there's somebody having an argument and I just check out and everything's peaceful in my world and I just disassociate. So we can all do that. But it's really a difference between, I think, being more introverted. 9s their gift is to kind of give people space to be themselves. And the 2 tends to be more aggressive around what do they need? How can I give it to them? Now, there can be blends between that, but I would just say, notice what happens when you're under stress. Twos tend to overhelp when they're under stress, and nines tend to withdraw more and just act like everything's fine, but they don't get so assertive around helping people. That's one way that might make a difference in understanding.
Michael, that was so helpful. I'm so
Awesome.
grateful. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Rose. Felicia, to you.
Hi, thank you so much, Michael and Surrender School. This is great. I have during COVID, I started Al-Anon and ACA, although there was no alcoholism in my family. There was just a lot of dysfunction, a lot of personality disorders. I'm a trauma therapist myself. And I just wanted to thank you because what you've talked about so far, it's almost like you've been a fly on the wall in my life. Like you are describing me completely. And I thought it was pathological, I mean, I've always told my therapist, I was born with a 3rd-degree sunburn. I'm just too sensitive to everything. Rejection sensitivity I just thought it was all PTSD. And you're telling me I was kind of born this way. Is that right? I'm glad Jasmine asked that question because I really would like to know. Thank you.
Absolutely. So you're born with a real sensitivity to that. Depending on the rejection you experience, that sensitive will be heightened so that you feel it more quickly and more deeply. If you're in a household that's balanced and there's loving kindness in the mix, then you're not as likely to take things at such an intense level of rejection when someone rejects you. So the more you're rejected as a little one, the higher the sensitivity is, so that, it's just screaming, because on some level, the message is, I got wounded here, and I need healing and loving kindness to calm this thing down. So, having that sensitivity to rejection means I've got to learn some different body meditations to start anchoring some of my attention away from the wound. Therapy, getting loving support from people I care about, who care about me. And, actually learning to receive loving kindness, because there can be sort of a story for twos. If you're kind to me, I've got to be twice as kind to you to keep it equal. There can be kind of but it's not because all those intense rejection patterns, you were first born with that predisposition, and they were just heightened by whatever suffering you went through. So it's not like there's nothing wrong with you. You are challenged with, how do I, heal myself so these particular patterns don't eat all my attention. And that's when meditation comes in, and healing practices and exercise and all the things that start to nurture you.
Oh, thank you so much for that. And I've got it on tape that you said there's nothing wrong with me.
That's right. There's nothing wrong with you.
Oh, one last question. Do twos, are they prone to develop anxiety disorders or panic disorders if they grow up in abusive households?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because their attention gets heightened around rejection, and that turns into anxiety and worry.
Right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you, Felicia. Okay, so Cheryl, and then Dave/Kim, and then I've got a couple that came in this way, and then you can move on, Michael. So Cheryl, go ahead.
Oh, great. Yeah, great. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Michael. I've been, this is great. Oh my God. So which book are you reading from?
I'm reading from The Alchemy of the Enneagram and Transforming Addiction, which is a
That's
book.
yours, yeah.
Yeah, that's my book. Yeah.
Okay, I got to get that. I've been meaning to get it. Yeah, I'm a 2 to my core. I've known that. And I just thought I was a blackout codependent all my life before I started doing the Enneagram work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I didn't know it was my personality type. until I started with Surrender School, which is recently. So
Awesome.
this is mind blowing for me,
Hmm.
and it's in a good way and a bad way in some some aspects. Thank God I've done a lot of work in recovery, 31 years. But
Yeah.
here I love. Okay, so I have a real sensitivity to on being rejected, and it's heightened when I guess it's heightened in certain aspects and situations, and because I've done the work, it might not be as severe
Hmm.
as it once was. Because yeah, I had severe panic attacks, like if I had to go into withdrawal, that's another fellowship or something like that, or be abandoned, quote unquote abandoned, or the breakup of a relationship or something like that. And so my questions are, um, is each type, like we go to Codependence Anonymous or Al-Anon, so is everybody capable of being codependent?
Oh,
Right.
yes.
Yep. But it doesn't mean what? That they have the heightened sensitivity to it like a type 2?
Well, a type two, the gift of the two is an open heart and a sensitivity to deep love, but also
Mm-hmm.
deep rejection. Other
Mm-hmm.
types don't have that open heart. They have another sort of center of gravity. So each of the types, when they lose contact with love and feeling loved, begins to manifest the defensive pattern of that type.
And
So,
okay.
yeah, so, so for the two, it's I go and, and I express it, it can be codependent, taking care of people, but that particular type that I am, the codependence will come through the protective pattern that I inherited. So for type twos, I
Exactly.
start giving everybody everything and taking care of them, and
Mm-hmm.
nothing
Yep.
for me. And
Yep.
other types will have a different thing that they do.
Okay, great. So the one thing I'm still, after all these years, I still struggle with that starvation for that need to be loved.
Hmm?
And when I'm not, I feel rejected. And mostly now in romantic situations. So if I'm dating, I meet someone, I automatically, it's almost like a default. I want to go into, oh my God, what can I do? How can I be helpful? How can I give them something?
Yes,
And
of
how
course.
do I stop that?
Well, so I
I
think,
still do it. I mean,
yeah.
it's so automatic.
So the first thing I would just encourage you to do is when you notice that you're doing it, is to not beat yourself up. The story can be, I should be over this by now. What's wrong with me? All
Yeah.
that strengthens the pattern. But then the next thing to do is to really, if you can, sense into your body. What am I feeling in my heart? Well, I'm feeling abandonment, or there's this loss of a love connection. What's that like? It's painful. Okay. And then what's going on in my head center? Well, I'm having a story. Maybe I did something wrong, or maybe I'm not lovable. So I just notice,
I'm
okay, there's the story. And then I
I'm
try to,
being punished.
yeah, I'm being punished. I deserve this, whatever. So I have a belief system. And then I try to also bring some attention into my body and just find my feet on the floor or the palms of my hands and try to have some of my attention on my body, because that's going to weaken the kind of abandonment trance that I get caught in. And that's the two trance. I'm not loved, I'm being abandoned. Oh my God, I'm going to die. And if I have some ability to bring attention into my body and divide some of my attention, the trance doesn't take me as hard. And the other thing is just to, after you've been okay, you're going to get triggered, you're going to feel it. Is there any way that you can, you know, if nothing else, resist making yourself wrong for it? Anything you can do to
Mhm.
resist the punishment will start to soften the way you get entranced by the pattern.
Mhm. And I won't die because it feels like I'm going to die.
Absolutely,
Hmm.
absolutely. And
Okay,
and
thank
then
you.
then the other thing is to be in a group where people are talking about two issues, and you realize I'm not alone. And everybody's particular trance, it takes a lot of patience and compassion before the trance patterns start to weaken. And now you've got something to work with since you understand the type 2. So I would say
Right.
also get the book and look at the suggestions and see if they help.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Michael.
And just do the levels of health for the 2 and just do
Okay,
a quick run through, and then we'll come back to questions. And
that
let's see
sounds
if I
good.
can.
Perfect.
So, as I've said in other presentations, there's 3 health. You know, when I'm a healthy 2, I'm residing in one of these levels, which means I have access to my innate gifts. So, level 1, when I'm really in a conscious, healthy place, I become deeply unselfish, humble, altruistic, giving unconditional love to yourself and others. So there's just a deep compassion for the suffering of others and myself. You feel it's a privilege to be in the lives of others. Level 1, at my best. Level 2, still healthy. I'm empathic, compassionate towards others, caring and concerned about the needs of others. If you've got a type 2 in your life, they're always noticing when you have needs and offering, can I help? Thoughtful, warm-hearted, forgiving, and sincere. The 2 has natural access to the heart, the warmth of the heart, the loving energy of the heart. And when I'm healthy, I generate that, and people are touched by it. Level 3, encouraging and appreciative. I appreciate people at depth. There's a real feeling about just, in a sense, honoring who you are. I'm able to see the good in others and see that people are fundamentally good, and when they're not acting good, it's because they're in a tough place. So service is important, but I also take care of myself, and I'm nurturing and generous, truly giving. But at a healthy level, I'm able to notice when people don't need my help, even though I have an answer for them. I am clear enough to ask if I can help them, rather than assuming I know what's right. So when I drop down to level 4, this indicates this is when I'm less certain of being loved, where the rejection pattern is stronger, where I have doubt that I'm lovable. And so at level 4, that we call this entering the average level, I want to be closer to others, so I start people-pleasing. And people-pleasing is I compliment in service of, now you're going to like me more. As opposed to when I'm healthy, I compliment you because I just feel it. I don't need you to give me anything back. But at level 4, I become sometimes overly friendly or overly kind. Sometimes I reach in across people's boundaries, full of good intentions. And then down a little further, I start to give seductive attention. If I see there's a way I can seduce you with compliments, then I do it. And again, this is all unconscious. I'm not doing it to be evil or mean, but mostly I'm feeling like you won't love me for just as I am. So I do some things to get some kind of security. I start stroking people. I start flattering them. And again, flattery is in service of making sure I feel okay. Compliments are in service of generating a sense of well-being in you. So love is important to the type 2, and this becomes something I get overly attached to at level 4. Level 5, we say level 5 is when I really lose the ability to observe myself. And this is where the unhealthy patterns of the 5 start to take over. But in my imagination, I feel like I'm doing it in service of caring for you. So my self-image, while I'm doing these less becoming behaviors, is that I'm just being a loving person. So for the type 2, I can become overly intimate and intrusive, breaking in on conversations, trying to get more personal information from people as a way of sort of holding them, have a need to be needed, so I can start hovering, meddling, controlling people in the name of love. And, the need to be needed, I think we all have a need to be needed. The question is, am I aware of whether that need is starting to manifest in unhealthy behaviors? So you want others to depend on you. You know, it's like here I become so good at giving to people and meeting their needs that they start to depend on me. I become their anchor. So you give, but you also expect a return, which sends mixed messages. And then the last example, level 5, you're enveloping and possessive. So here I really start to latch onto people and start to create a sort of inner contract with myself that because I've been so kind to them, they really owe me. So I can become self-sacrificial, meaning, you know, I can't do enough for others. And there's a way I start to wear myself out, overgiving. You know, this is where the word being a helpaholic starts to come in at level 5. And then, you know, so then the level 6 is when I really start to check out, again, from a place of desperation. If in the core of me I feel like I'm unlovable and I'll never have love, and I've, you know, experienced some suffering around this, then I can start turning this sort of on end, upside down. So I start to feel self-important and self-satisfied as a compensation for feeling completely unlovable. And I can start to, in a sense, kind of create a way of being in the world that says, you know, I'm the only one around here who knows how to love. The rest of you are so shallow, even God weeps when he looks at you, right? But there's a way I start to develop a kind of pride as a way of covering my hurt and my sense of rejection. So I start to feel like I'm indispensable. If it wasn't for me, this boat would not sail. And you start to, you know, instead of, you know, undermining yourself, you can start to overrate your efforts and say, you know, I'm the most important one here. It's only because of me that this thing succeeded. So all the best of the types start to, you know, the best qualities of the types start to reverse themselves when they go down to level 6. So here's where, due to my suffering around not being loved and all the ways I've tried to get it, I can start to develop hypochondria, meaning I, you know, get a lot of different kind of physical illnesses. And also, you know, I can start to go into kind of full martyr role and, you know, again, feel prideful that I'm such a great martyr. And at my best, I get aggressive. I can be overbearing, patronizing, presumptuous. And again, at level 6, I'm not aware of myself doing this. At level 5, when I'm intruding on people's boundaries, I can't see myself. So we can say that from level 5 on down, my ability to observe myself, which, you know, if I can't observe myself, it's pretty hard to change, that has disappeared. And my work is to begin to understand and notice when I'm at one of these levels. If I start to notice it, the trance-like power of that level becomes less and less. So I'm not going to do 7, 8, 9 because it's just basically the worst of everything becomes worse. So let's see about the questions that are popping up now. Who's next?
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, most people on 7, 8, 9 wouldn't be here, right?
Right, right.
Maybe in prison or something, but they wouldn't be
That's
here. Okay, thank you. All right. Dave or Kim, would you want to raise your hand? Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Michael. We were talking earlier about the arrows, and with an 8 and a 2, there's an arrow between each other. And I was wondering, I know you always say we all have all of these types within us, right? It's just some are
some
more
degree, yeah.
prominent than others. But can we learn from another person who's of the type we have the arrow from, like the more healthier aspects of that type? Because, so like, as an 8, can I learn how to be nicer to people from having a friend who's a 2? And
Yeah,
maybe, I'm not sure, I'm not as clear on the other direction. Like maybe, I think it has something to do with boundaries. Like
well,
maybe,
8 goes to 2 and 8 goes to 5. So I'm going to answer yes to that. You know, the healthy types help me attune to what's healthy in me, but also in learning, you know, let's say an 8, if an 8 is with a healthy 2 and can develop the humility to be taught and receive teaching, then, you know, that's where we learn some of our most important things is from other people. Other healthy people become, plant a seed in us. And so I say yes to that. You know, what do we say in recovery? You're only as healthy as the company you keep. And that means if I'm hanging out with people who are healthy, I start picking up their healthy patterns. So, we suck that stuff in, and it mixes with our type and can bring out the best in our type, or the direction of arrows that are positive. So, and the other half of the question I'm going to put in the parking lot for when I do the arrows, which will be down in the future away.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Michael. And Lisa H., to you.
Hi, thank you so much for this. This is so fabulous. I'm a 9, and I'm wondering if you have any hints on, dealing with a 23-year-old daughter who's a 2. She took the test, but she hasn't studied the Enneagram. In terms of, I guess I want the magic answer to convince her to have the self-care, right? Because she has an eating disorder, and she's dealt with it from 16 on, and she's better than she was, but she's still quite unhealthy. And I see the lack of self-care in all areas of her life, but yet she has project people that she wants to heal and fit and rescue. And is there any way as a parent to elevate any? I know that's codependent of me to even ask, I realize.
No, it's a really legitimate question, and the answer that I have is that I have an opportunity to help when my daughter comes to me saying this thing keeps happening, and I notice, oh, that's a 2 thing you're caught up in. And I can say, well, so let me hear you out. Sounds like you give too much, and then people don't maybe receive it. What's that like for you? What's that feel like for you? So I'm always just trying to bring it back to, how is this feeling for you? Because if she starts to get clearer that it causes me suffering, and she's okay with just voicing that, that's going to start opening up the whole conversation about, I don't want to suffer like this as much. So it's more about kind of gentle receiving in my world, and also to the very best of my ability to model what I'm talking about, meaning taking care of. If I take good care of myself, my kids always see it. They may not take it on for 5 years, but they take it and then they do it better than I do it. So there's that kind of a gap between the teaching. And I think also, anyway, if she beats herself up around it, is really to help her let go of the judgment. Has she read about the type 2?
I don't think she has. I'm going to try to do that. She's
Well,
got suggestions from me.
right. So if she's, and that's just how it is, right? Everybody else might use them, but not from our own kids. But at some point, you might even talk about, as without trying to influence, like as a type 9, this is what I struggle with. Do you notice that about me? And I'll bet you she'd be quite willing to point out your flaws, but there's something around, I have this tool and it's helping me, and you can help me too if you can just notice these patterns. And if it's spot on for her, she will then start to get curious about herself. But the challenge is, whenever I've approached my kids with, this will really help you, not interested. But if I talk about my own stuff, that is more inviting for them. Unless they're at a point where they will say, do we always have to talk about the Enneagram? And I say, no, we don't. But, just keep working it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, Shirley, to you.
Hello, Dr. Naylor and everybody else. My name is Shirley.
Hi, Shirley.
And hi, and I introduce myself as slowly but surely learning to become the authentic me. So my question was about the pride, and then you just got into it in a big way by going to number 4 and lower.
Yes.
And so I had a question. One is that you talked about how the 2, like when we have this high degree of sensitivity where we notice someone is feeling less than towards us, how we go after them. And I find it interesting that I'm very like having this out of my body experience and can't tolerate the feelings that someone is thinking of me or feeling towards me as less than. And I find that I work very hard at being in this trance of keeping myself from feeling the the truth and the reality of what's going on, that I almost don't want to feel these feelings. And then that really drives my eating disorder, because that kind of takes all those highways of the looping between my own two ears and kind of creates like a single lane road. It just somehow I can distract myself with that. And so I want to say, like, on the one hand, so the Surrender School and Al-Anon and the Enneagram have really helped me to learn that I have feelings. It's okay to have them and to express them. So I know. So I guess my question is about kind of this trance and this like unconscious state. I'm assuming that twos like to kind of, that's where the pride is. The pride is, when somebody when I have a disproportionate reaction to someone, and I tell myself, look at all I'm doing, I'm dispensable, this, that, and the other thing, I feel like I'm so dishonest. Like I find myself like lying and really covering up that. And I don't know, that's kind of like, I was wondering if you had something to say about that.
Yeah. So to me, the key to all of that is beginning to notice, oh, there's that voice of pride going through me. I don't beat myself up for it. I go, oh, here in my head center, I'm having all these thoughts. I'm indispensable, and they're idiots, and they're not sensitive like I am. They don't give like I am. And if I can notice, oh, there is the voice. That's like the voice of the personality running. I go, oh, there's my personality. There's the pride point. Huh, how interesting. I know what else it has to say. So I try to be objective and step back from it rather than go, curse yourself for having pride, because that just keeps it going. But just to notice, get curious. Oh, where did that come from? Well, it came from feeling like I felt less than that person. And somehow feeling less than that person triggered this whole trance-like story. So the way I work with it, as a type 4, my trance that I fall into is envy. And little things can suddenly put me in my imagination and my head center around how they have something that I don't have, or they got a better deal than I did, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole way I can get lured into the movie of envy. And if I'm awake, I go, oh, there's the movie. Got it. There's playing again today. This is only the fourth time today, where it's kind of a slow day there in my imagination. But if you can start to notice the trance and then name it when it happens, it sounds like yours is a trance of pride. So all of a sudden you're having all this prideful stuff and maybe imagining things about the situation, or imagining what you think other people are thinking, etc. And part of the work is to notice there's the pride. Okay, I know how this ends. It ends the same way each time. I'm still compelled to watch it, but can I bring some attention down into my body? Can I sense my feet on the ground? Can I find my breath? And just really try to bring my attention out of the imagination stream. And, maybe that means I journal about it. Maybe I go for a walk at that point. Or maybe if I'm really brave, I jump in a cold shower for 5 minutes. That'll take you out of your imagination in lightning speed, right? And you'll be there. So
Yes.
Just some things to work with. And then, maybe even to, again, share it with people who you're close to. Like, okay, at the end of the day, how many times did I go into pride? And I just look back and go, oh, today wasn't bad. It was only 8 times. And I look at it from a place of curiosity and a sense of humor, if I can, because none of these patterns you chose to have. And now you have them, and now you get to undo them. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you, Shirley. Okay, Lauren, to you.
Oh man, I was debating if I wanted to go on camera. Guess here I am. Hi, Michael. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I
you're
don't
welcome.
I don't think that I've learned anything more helpful about acceptance of self and others as the Enneagram. So with that, I mean, not to like a butt kiss now, and that'll be on tape. But really, I feel like I keep grabbing that PDF and go, oh, that person's coming from fear. And even if it's, even if I'm not right, because I don't know what they are, it gives me peace of mind. So I'm, just really grateful. And I keep talking about it, and I'm hoping to loop some more in. Anyways, as a 4, a pretty suspected 4 for the last couple of months now, I let somebody from the outside do some assessment and practicing. And the other one, I believe she mentioned, was a 2. And I was like, oh, because we think we know these things. But as you went through it today, I was like, oh, dang damn it. Like I do that and I do that. And so I won't belabor it because I'm pretty sure I'm a 4. But could you talk about, and maybe it's not the right time for it either. I'm looking at the arrows between the 4 and the 2. And I know when I kick into 1, I feel like I'm very familiar with it these days. But what is the relationship 4 to 2? Can you talk about that?
Well, just very briefly, the 4, the healthy movement to 2 is where I become less self-absorbed with my suffering and how I've been offended or my worries about failing myself, and really begin to attune to the needs of others. I can do that in a healthy way, or I can do it in a way that is, overbearing or helpaholic. And so, one of the things, if you wanted to understand between the 4 and the 2, would be to get an Enneagram book. I always recommend this one. I heard it's pretty good. And to read the 4 and the 2 and see which is strongest. Because 4s and 2s, like 9s and 2s, are cousins. Yeah. So there's some affinity, especially when you have that line to 2. You're gonna exhibit 2 energies, either healthy or unhealthy. So it can be helpful just to read both of those and get a sense of, you're probably one or the other.
Yeah, and I think I'm in the right place, but I know that I kick into it. Whichever one I am, I almost can feel me kicking into unhealthy sometimes. And I think as a kid, as somebody else was describing, I think I relied on it heavily.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing is I was looking at the wheel before, trying to hang on to my thought and prepare. I was realizing that, even if I'm on that kind of side of the wheel or whatever, it's like 9s, 1s, 2s, those are all my buddies, and I feel like I really struggle to understand the other part of the wheel, the 7, 6, Anyways, thank you very much.
How long have you been at it?
Oh, just a couple months.
Okay,
not very long.
Just stick with it, because people, when they're first learning about it, notice that they have an affinity with certain types, and other types it's like, I don't have a clue. But the more you listen to these kinds of presentations and you hear people talk, the more it will start to feel more, you'll be able to see the difference between types.
Yeah, it's been so insightful. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you, Lauren. Pedrag, to you.
Thanks. Thanks, Michael. My name is Padraig. I'm over 30 years in recovery. And there was a lot of questions, but I bought your book and I was riveted. I couldn't move, and it brought up an awful lot of emotions in me, excitement, anger, hurt. And I could certainly identify with a lot of the abandonment and rejection. And but there was a couple of things. It's one thing I underlined, I came across, and it has abandoned himself in the action of caring for others, for another, or is avoiding his feelings of anger, sadness, and humiliation by reaching to support another. And I don't know, I'm a good while in recovery, and I noticed the whole pattern going through my life, where I did a lot of voluntary work and got a lot from it. I could see that I was avoiding. It was giving me great solace, but there was a lot going on inside of me that I wasn't looking at in the meantime.
Yes.
But I got feelings and emotions that came up from reading about the 2 that went directly back to my childhood.
Yes.
Directly back to my childhood.
Yep.
And then, you know, they don't lie, those inner kind of like, ooh,
Yeah.
moment,
Yeah.
you know?
Absolutely.
And so I see, like, you know, it is important, and I will in time look at the 9, especially at the 9, you know, but it's a pattern that's gone through all my life. You know, I grew up in a family of 6 children, parents, and I was the so-called caretaker, you know, go between mother and father. And still in recent years, I have to avoid contact with my siblings. My parents are well gone, you know, but I have to avoid contact with my siblings because I still have that role.
Yes.
It never went away,
Yeah.
you know. When they have a problem, they get in touch. Otherwise, I never hear from them. Christmas, birthday, anything.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So you're the giver. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So, you know, those patterns run deep in our psyche. And so it's not about trying to get rid of them, because that's impossible in my perspective. But it's about beginning to observe them when they happen and trying not to beat myself up when I see it. And if I watch it with objectivity, meaning, here I am, I'm going to help again. Do I really want to? Not really. I can't help it. It's like gravity pulling me towards this person. I mean, I've watched my wife dozens of times, hundreds of times, when someone says, would you help me here? And before she says yes, her body's already moving there. And then maybe later on she goes, I didn't want to do that, but I did it anyway. I said, well, welcome to the life of the 2. That's the 2 pattern. So if I can be kind towards myself in the aftermath and begin to notice, you know, what starts to pull me in without judging myself, you know, like one type 2 said, for 1 month, when somebody would ask me for help, I would say next month. And I said, in my insides, it was just like killed me to say, next month I'll help you. I can't do it right now. But over time, over about a month, she started to develop a sort of inner knowing about her compulsivity so that she could actually choose differently. So, you know, that's something to take on. That's a big one. She said I had to sit on my hands just about every day because people were used to me helping them and giving to them. And plus it felt good, but it was also habitual. So, you know, if there's a way to just to begin to notice how that whole pattern pops up inside you and takes you. I mean, you know, 2s will say, all of a sudden I was helping and I didn't even volunteer for it. It's just my body's over there helping. So the more you see it with a sense of humor and you know, not beating yourself up, the more you'll start to have more freedom around it.
And the other side of it is, I find it extremely difficult to ask for help.
Yes, yes, yes.
Ask for help. On the opposite, I would rush out, no problem. You know,
Yes.
when, what time.
Yes, absolutely.
If you ask for help, it is a block, comes up. I don't know how to ask for help.
So, you know, some people will work with other folks, close friends, and say, will you notice when it would be a good place for me to ask for help and I don't do it because I just don't like have the neural pathways. Some people will go and work with a therapist or a coach and really work on that particular pattern that I seem to be asleep to. You know, and so reaching out for help in some way like that can be part of the journey. And I think I put some stuff in the book around asking for help. I mean, it's you know, for a lot of type 2s, they say when they start to ask for help, it feels like I'm going to die, or it feels like I'm going to get punished. And it's like I just get freaked out and I don't step into it. So I often say, working on these patterns, I can't do it by myself. I need to have a buddy with me or a group, a men's group, whatever, that helps me lean into this because it feels like I'm going to just come undone. And that's just the depth of the pattern. So just some things to think about.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks, Frederick. Selma, to you, come on, go ahead and come on camera if you would. Excellent.
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
You know, I think you hit the nail on the head, what you just said, that continuing to work with a group or someone or whatever. I think you kind of answered my question because
I'm always intrigued by the word trance when we get into that trance, because you like to use the metaphors from the Lord of the Rings and all those movies, and
Yeah.
it's the lure of the ring, right?
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
and so intense. And what I was thinking was, this weekend I fell into a really painful trance about not being seen when I tried to offer my help, and I was shot down. And so I didn't realize till that till you talking, I got caught in my trance of I need to be seen. And it was just one statement someone said, and I was floored for the rest of the day, so depressed, wanting my husband to see how depressed I was. And he does not buy into it. He knows, but he doesn't take the hook, and it was so painful all day. And so I was thinking, as you've been talking about, oh, just observe and say, isn't this interesting? But I think sometimes those trances feel so real.
Yeah.
As a 4, I envy, as you mentioned, and I think, but they do have more. They do have better. I observe, look what you're doing. You're comparing, you're in envy, but it's true. Look what they have and look what you have. And so it's, I mean, sure, everybody has not a 4, but everybody gets in their own trance. And I
Yeah,
think,
yeah,
that would be my question, is like, when it feels so real, like you said, you're gonna die if you don't,
yeah.
help, whatever. I just wanted you to speak to that.
Well, so do you happen to have my book by any chance?
I haven't gotten it yet. Yeah.
Okay, so when you get it, I want you to read the suggestions and the answer, the one answer around envy. First off, the reason these patterns are so powerful
Yeah.
is they feel absolutely true in our
True.
body.
Yes,
It's
true.
like it's like a fact in my body. It's a fact.
Yeah.
And then my head confirms it. It's true. They have more of this, right? Or they have
Look at
more.
the evidence, right? Look at the
Right.
evidence. Yeah.
Right. And you can always find evidence. I can always find evidence for my envy. And so when I'm caught in it, I believe it, and so the challenge is, how do I start to disidentify and not be eaten by the pattern? It's almost like the pattern just sucks me right into it and I jump into the movie. So how do I disidentify? Well, one thing I can begin to do is learning to practice sensing my body and inhabiting my body. So one of the things that happens for me when I get triggered by envy, I bring attention, right? Half of my attention, if I can, into my breath and my breathing and my body. So I'm not all emerged with, there's something so merging with the envy that actually feels horrible in a wonderful way. I don't know.
Yes. No,
It's like,
I was just
oh,
thinking,
I'm just getting crucified
it's
here.
like the ring, right? It's like,
Yes,
I
it's an
gotta,
addiction. Yes,
yes, an
yes.
addiction to that feeling. Yes.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of the ring and Frodo and how he just it's like that's an example of how we get caught in our patterns. It's that strong. So one of the things I can do is at the end of the day, I can review when I got triggered and notice what was the first thing that took me in. What was the lure, I can review that and, be aware of it and not beat myself up for it. That's the big thing, because at some point I'll start to see the lure before the whole movie unfolds. And I can go back. I've watched you 3 million times. You're still the best movie in my theater of my mind, but I know how this ends. It's always bad. So, you get more skillful in not taking the bait.
And I think I have to, for me, for the envy thing, I have to just tell myself, well, they do have more, but that has nothing to do with how you want to feel. And I mean, they may have more, but I don't have to feel envious,
But
right?
isn't it true that you don't know what they have less of?
Yes. Yes.
That's important. You don't know where they suffer.
You're
And
right. Yeah.
and
So they,
that's
yeah,
so
yeah.
part of the way I work with myself is I go, I'm projecting all this onto these people, but I have no idea what's in their soul or where they suffer or where they feel lack. And I'm just believing my imagination about them. So
Okay.
that can help. That can help.
I'll order your book right when we're done here. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Welcome.
Michael. Thank you so much. So we have, it's a little bit after the top of the hour. We have one quick question, if you don't mind, Anne, and then we'll officially close the session. But Michael, you stay until the bottom
Okay.
of the hours, right? Okay,
All
cool.
right.
Thank you.
So
All
I
right, go
just
ahead, Anne.
thank you so much. I wanted to thank you so much, Michael, because something, an epiphany occurred here in this kitchen just now.
Awesome. Oh,
After working decades in healthcare, so a nurse by career, and then in all kinds of, two type work on the daily, I made a switch in my volunteer work, and I'm now working with law enforcement, specifically on cold cases.
wow.
And I went from a position of knowing, really being like the vice president and knowing what we're doing and taking the team with me and all the whatever gobbledygook, just, really knowing your stuff, to coming in and being humbled by what I don't know. But you said something, and it just happened to really work for me. Two things in particular. One, all the team has been very, very engaged and very helpful. But one of the teammates, who's an attorney, in my mind, hasn't given me enough assignments. And it's only in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I put myself through some kind of crazy period like a couple of days ago with, why isn't he asking me? I offered my help. He needs the help. I know he needs the help. Just went on this crazy pattern, and then starting to feel bad and uncared for. And oh my God, I must have done something. I put myself through the paces.
Yeah.
And of course, the next day, he's like, oh my God, I've got a project for you. Can you help me?
Of course.
Right. And so we do this to ourselves. So that was one. But the second thing that you said today is how difficult it is for me to ask for help. Although there's nobody on this team that expects me to understand the Department of Justice crime lab database. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
I'm not even the person who usually types. In healthcare, I had peeps that did that stuff. I did not. So here I am in that database. And having to ask for help triggers this whole thing of, are you really being helpful to them? It just has triggered something, and you just enlightened me that I'm just really kind of reeling in my own cuckoo-ness, because they are so appreciative of everything. It's definitely in my own head, but thank you for that, because I never envisioned that the asking for help part was also part of this going to a darker place, if you will.
Yeah.
And so you've kind of freed me a little bit with that. You
Yeah,
freed
awesome.
me with that comment. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're most welcome. I'm glad that was helpful. All right. So Cheryl, why don't I do a short meditation? And I think you're muted.
Me?
Yeah.
I'm not
You were,
now, but
you look like you were
I was
talking.
just quiet. I know it was an amazing thing to see.
Well, can we do a closing meditation and then,
That would be great. Thank
because I
you.
forgot to do the opening meditation, but
So did I.
it's all
so-
connected. It's all connected. So just invite you to find your body and your breath, rise and fall of the diaphragm, belly. Just putting some attention into the sensation of your belly rising and falling. Just taking a moment to settle and land in the chair and feel your feet on the ground, your body in the chair, your back against the chair. And just relaxing on each out-breath. Bringing a relaxation into your face and head, cheeks. And if you can, just notice as you're breathing where sensation is occurring. People tend to have different parts of their body that when they start to slow down, they feel more sensation bubbling up inside and on the exterior. Palms of the hands are often easiest to access. And then bring attention to your heart center, located in the middle of your chest. And just imagine that the center is inhabited by a beautiful sun that's shining magnificently out into the universe, finding its way to your loved ones, finding its way to the globe, just abiding with this shining sun in the center of your being, where essence is located. Just take a moment to be with this. Thank you. Okay.
All right, so we are open for anybody who has questions or comments if you want to share.
Thanks for recovering with us.